You mentioned the fan base, and today's music changes quite quickly. So, did you know the fan base was still there when you came back in 2009?
Well, there were lots of kind of online petitions for us to come back together. So we knew there were a lot of fans out there that, you know, we were actually contracted to do a greatest hits, which we hadn't fulfilled our contract, which is what started it all. But online there were quite a few kind of petitions for us to come back and start doing gigs again and stuff like that. So we knew there was a fan base there. I mean, and then it wasn't until we actually did come back till we saw how big the fan base was. So
yeah, it started on MySpace and then
I remember MySpace.
Yeah, and then moved over to YouTube. You know, and people were, you know, sharing and posting videos of live stuff, live videos, and all this kind of stuff. And so when we got to the point where we were doing the greatest hits, we realised that a lot of our fan base was still there, and actually it had grown and got younger.
Yeah.
So.
Because what did you put that down? Thank you.
Thank you.
Because I guess that we did quite a few legendary performances. So, and there was a definite kind of devoid. There was definitely a period in the early kind of noughties that there was devoid of really good rock bands, you know. It went very electronic and rock music got very indie schmindy and a bit softer.
Sure.
And I think it became really clear that the 90s was one of the best periods for rock music in the history of time, you know. Because if I think about all the bands that we used to play with, I mean, now these bands are like, you know, we're all kind of legendary, all of us. Smashing Pumpkins, Rage Against the Machine, Smashing Pumpkins, Nirvana, you know, we were in that Soundgarden. We were playing with those American bands, Marilyn Manson. We were playing with all these really big American bands, you know, and we were in that world. We weren't in the indie schmindy Brit rock, Brit pop thing at all. We were very Americanized, you know. So we played with those guys a lot, and now you look back at it and you think, wow, you know, that was a real amazing time in history, you know, where grunge was happening, and then the British were coming up with really good rock bands, and it was really inspiring. So I think a lot of fans, when they look back in that period, they realise that Skunk Anansie was right up there, and they're like, well, who's Skunk Anansie? And then they start swapping things on Facebook and stuff like that. So the interest started just going back up again.
Because you mentioned this void in a sense. Do you think when around 2009, 2010, that void was still there in terms of solid rock band?
Sorry, say that again?
That void that you mentioned, do you think that happened in the 90s? Do you think it was still there at the end of the decade?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I think that you really felt it in festivals, you know, because festivals are really built for rock bands and for live music and indie music and rock music, and because you've got to have a lot of power and energy to get 100,000 people rocking their socks off, you know, and pop music isn't really going to do that in the same way at that time. Maybe pop music now, because pop music now is very rock influenced and hip hop influenced, and the songs are bigger and louder, you know. But at that time, you know, I remember like all of a sudden you got very mellow pop bands starting to do festivals, you know, starting with V Festival, and they became kind of, and a lot of these bands really, they can't do festivals because they're not really built for being live. You know, they're built in the studio and they're built for that situation. So you saw a lot of like very weak-ass pop bands doing festivals, and it really didn't work. And I think that's when the rock band started to come back again, because a rock band would come on and everyone would go crazy, you know? It's a different energy. You know, pop bands are really good for TV shows or for like indoors, you know, when you've got lots of screaming kids, you know, but for grown-up kind of teenagers and festivals, you know, rock is better.
So when this whole, obviously you start writing new material, and then the album Wonderlustre, was this in the back of your mind that you wanted a raw sounding rock album?
Well, that's what we are, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think Wonderlustre, we didn't really go into the studio with a kind of an idea of what it was we wanted the album to be. We we'd been away and we'd come back and done the Smashes and Trashes Greatest Hits, and then we'd written 3 songs for that. But in the process of writing those 3 songs, we wrote about 10 or 12 songs altogether. So we kind of decided to do an album with them. So when we went in to do Wonderlustre, we already had a load of songs that we'd already written that weren't really specifically, for a record. So we kind of just went with whatever it was on Wonderlustre. But then when we came to Black Traffic, it was very focused and very much okay, we know what we are. Let's go in and do this record and make a great rock record. But with An Architecture, I think we really wanted to do something very different, and it was a conscious effort, wasn't it? Certainly on the part
this half of the band really pushed for the electronic side. Basically, what he's kind of trying to politely say.
Yeah.
We really wanted to have a new, different sound to Skunk Anansie, a new kind of electronic sound. I mean, I DJ techno music, and Mark was DJing at Point as well, and Mark has always been into his electronic music, and we just wanted to have that element within the band that we used to have before in the 90s, there were lots of electronic elements around then, in the kind of prodigy kind of way,
Yeah.
But I realised why the other 2 members were a bit kind of like scared about it, because I think a couple of albums had come out, like Korn album and the Muse album, that were really electro kind of heavily influenced, and in some ways those albums for me lost the soul of the band. The sound of the album got lost in a completely different genre of music, and that's because you get someone that comes in that's used to producing electronic music, and then they're producing a rock band. They're going to do what they used to do, and they're going to do electronic music. Sure. And it's very difficult to get a producer that can kind of stand in both feet and have the electronic side and the rock side. Trent Reznor's one of those guys that can do that amazingly well. Has a rock mentality, but it's all electronic. And so I could understand there was a huge hole that we could fall into in doing that, because it was designing a new Skunk Anansie, a new vibe, a new kind of sound. But, nobody wants to do the Muse thing, and nobody wants to do the Korn thing, because we don't want to lose our soul, in someone else's, vibe. So I can understand the trepidation. So we did a lot of experiment. We did some demos and we played around a lot. And in the end, it works really well, because it still sounds like Skunk Anansie, but it sounds like a brand new Skunk Anansie. But I think, like a lot of our rock fans will love it as well, because it's not such a departure. It's not like all of a sudden we're doing dubstep, or all of a sudden we've gone EDM, It's still rock sound, but it's just got a contemporary edge to it.
Was there a particular sound, because you say you were experimenting a lot, seeing what works. Was there a song or maybe a little bit of a song even that kind of, where you felt, okay, now we're moving in the right direction?
Yeah, Love Someone Else,
okay.
Death to the Lovers, Victim.
Victim. Yeah.
Those 3 songs were very kind of, those 3 songs set the style of the album.
They were very early on.
Love Someone Else is a really old song, but yeah, they were kind of, no, they weren't early on, they were kind of later. Victim was, because we wrote for 2.5 years. So,
right.
But I think that they were kind of near the end.
Victim came in Surrey, didn't it?
Yeah.
Victim arrived in Surrey, and then we worked on it more. Victim was one of the ones we worked on a lot, because we knew there was more in it to come out, and we weren't quite getting there. But we knew it was great. We just knew it wasn't finished. So we kept going back to it and going back to it and going back to it, and eventually the chorus arrived, didn't it? The one that had been eluding us for a while.
Yeah, so, I think we're really good at kind of knowing when we've not quite got something, and then being very happy when we know we're there. You can feel it. We're quite an emotional band when it comes to our music. We can feel when something's right, and we can feel when something's not quite there yet.
Just one more question about this Greatest Hits album.
Which one, the acoustic one or the Smashes and Trashes?
No, the Smashes and Trashes, because you say it was a contractual obligation you had to fulfill. Do you think if that wasn't there, that the band would still reform at the time it did?
I mean, it took us that to get us. It's a good question actually, because it took that obligation to get us back into a room talking again. Not because we'd fallen out, just because we'd split up and we were busy.
We do lots of different things, don't we?
I think I'd like to think that eventually we would have done, and we would have made more music.
Yeah, probably. I mean, there was no reason why not. We didn't have any horrible, acrimonious split up. You know, no one shagged anyone else's girlfriend. You know, no one snagged anyone else in the press. So there was no. We were all still friends. You know. We just needed a break from it, and we'd taken a break from it, and you know, we probably would have come back together at some point anyway, you know, sooner or later, because we were all friends, so there was no reason not to.
Was there a period of kind of getting back into things, kind of re-establishing the chemistry that you had?
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah. We had some really good conversations about why we broke up. And then we had some good conversations about why we'd be getting back together, you know. So, you know, we had a bit of a therapy kind of, you know, between ourselves, talking about any kind of bad blood or any kind of thing that was just there, and then we sort of raised the subject. We sat there and realized there was none. There was no bad blood. There was no, you said this or you said that. Everyone was like, oh, I don't have a problem with anybody, you know, so, yeah.
But that particular question, oh, sorry.
At the end of the day, we just wanted to make music again.
You know, the thing about Skunk Anansie is that it was everybody's first love.
Yeah.
It was everyone in the band's first love, and so you're always quite romantic about your first love.